The desert sun had already begun its slow descent toward the distant mountains when Thomas heard the sound that would change everything. It was faint at first, like the whisper of wind through the sagebrush, but as he urged his horse closer, he realized it was something far more human and desperate. Thomas McKenna had spent 43 years working this harsh but beautiful land. His weathered hands told the story of every fence mended, every calf delivered, and every drought weathered. At 58, he had seen enough of life to know when something wasn't right, and today the feeling had settled deep in his bones. Like an old injury before a storm, he had been checking the eastern boundary of his ranch when he first heard it. A sound so soft he almost dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks after too many hours in the saddle. But there it was again, carried on the evening breeze like a prayer or a plea. Following the sound through a grove of mesquite trees, Thomas found himself at the edge of a small clearing, where the sight before him stopped his heart cold. A young woman sat beneath the meager shade of a desert willow, clutching 2 infants to her chest. Her dress was torn and stained with dust and what looked like dried blood. Her face was streaked with tears and exhaustion, but it was her eyes that struck him most deeply. They held the look of someone who had traveled far beyond the edges of hope. She looked up at him, and Thomas saw her entire body tense with fear. In that moment, he realized how he must appear to her, a stranger on horseback silhouetted against the dying light. In her condition in this place, any man could mean danger. "Please," she whispered, and her voice carried the weight of someone who had already accepted defeat. "Just make it quick." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Here was a young mother so desperate, so worn down by whatever journey had brought her to this desolate place, that she believed death might be a mercy. The babies in her arms couldn't have been more than a few months old, and they stirred restlessly against her as if sensing her fear. Thomas slowly dismounted, keeping his movements deliberate and gentle. He had raised 3 daughters of his own, and he understood that right now his size and gender made him a threat, regardless of his intentions. He kept his distance and removed his hat, a gesture his late wife Martha had always said made him look less intimidating. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Thomas McKenna. I own the ranch just over that ridge. Are you injured?" She stared at him for a long moment, and Thomas could see her trying to decide whether to trust him. One of the babies began to cry, a thin, hungry sound that seemed to echo across the empty landscape. The sound seemed to break something inside her, and she began to weep quietly. "We haven't eaten in 2 days, she finally said. "The babies, they need milk, and I have nothing left to give them." Thomas felt his heart constrict. He had seen hardship before, but there was something about a mother's desperation that cut straight through all his defenses. Without thinking, he reached for the canteen at his belt and took a step forward. She flinched, and he stopped immediately, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's just water," he said gently. "When did you last drink?" "Yesterday morning, I think," she replied. "Maybe the morning before. The days have started running together." Thomas set the canteen on the ground between them and stepped back. She looked at it longingly but made no move to reach for it. He realized she was afraid to put the babies down even for a moment. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice as soothing as possible. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Coleman. These are my babies. Rebecca and Joshua. They're 4 months old." Thomas nodded, understanding now why she looked so young yet so worn. Twin babies would be a challenge for any mother, but out here alone and without resources, it was nearly impossible. "Sarah, where are you trying to get to?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know anymore. My husband died of fever 3 weeks ago. We were headed to California to start fresh, but after he passed, the wagon train wouldn't let us stay. Said a woman alone with babies would slow them down. They left us with some supplies, but those ran out days ago." The casual cruelty of it made Thomas's jaw clench, but he kept his voice gentle. "How long have you been walking?" "I'm not sure. Since they left us, I suppose. The babies are so heavy, and I kept having to stop to rest. I got lost somewhere along the way. I've been walking in circles for days." Thomas looked at the twins in her arms. They were thin, but not critically so yet. Sarah, however, looked like she was running on nothing but determination, and even that was nearly spent. "Sarah," he said carefully, "I'd like to help you and the babies. My ranch isn't far. My housekeeper Rose makes the best beef stew in 3 counties, and she's got a soft spot for little ones. Would you let me take you there?" Fear flickered across her face again. "I can't pay you." "We don't have any money left. I'm not asking for payment," Thomas replied. "I'm asking you to let a neighbor help a neighbor. She studied his face for a long time, as if trying to read his intentions in the lines around his eyes and the set of his mouth. Finally, she nodded almost imperceptibly. Thomas stepped forward slowly and picked up the canteen. "May I help you with some water first?" She nodded again, and he knelt beside her, careful to move slowly and keep his voice gentle. He helped her drink, then dampened his bandana, and carefully cleaned the dust from the babies' faces. They were beautiful children with their mother's dark eyes and wisps of golden hair. "They look like their mama," Thomas said with a smile that felt rusty from disuse. It had been a long time since he'd had reason to smile around children. "Everyone says they have their father's chin," Sarah replied, and for the first time there was something other than despair in her voice. Thomas helped Sarah to her feet and noticed how she swayed slightly. The woman was running on empty. He whistled low and his horse Dakota came closer. The big bay gelding had been his companion for 8 years and had the gentle temperament Thomas preferred in all his animals. "Dakota's going to carry you and the little ones," Thomas said. "I'll walk alongside and lead him. He's gentle as a lamb and steady as a church pew." Sarah looked uncertain. "I haven't ridden much, that's all right. Dakota knows his business. You just hold on to those babies and let him do the work." It took some maneuvering, but Thomas managed to get Sarah and the twins settled on Dakota's back. The horse stood perfectly still throughout the process, as if he understood the precious nature of his cargo. Thomas took the reins and began leading them toward home as the last light faded from the sky. The walk back to the ranch house took nearly an hour. Thomas kept up a steady stream of gentle conversation, telling Sarah about the ranch, about the changing seasons in this part of the country, about anything that might keep her mind off her troubles. She listened quietly, occasionally asking a question or making a soft comment. As they crested the ridge that overlooked his ranch, Thomas felt a familiar sense of pride. The house sat in a small valley with a creek running behind it. It wasn't grand, but it was solid and comfortable, built to last through the harsh desert seasons. Light glowed warmly in the windows, and Thomas knew Rose would have supper ready and the fire burning in the hearth. "It's beautiful," Sarah said quietly, and Thomas heard the exhaustion in her voice. "Giving way to something that might have been hope. It's home," he replied simply. Rose appeared on the front porch as they approached, drawn by the sound of Dakota's hooves on the gravel drive. She was a woman of 60 with silver hair and a no-nonsense manner that concealed a heart as big as the territory itself. She had been Thomas's housekeeper and friend since Martha's death 5 years earlier, and she ran the household with quiet efficiency. "Thomas McKenna," she called out. "What have you brought home this time?" Thomas helped Sarah down from the horse, and Rose immediately stepped forward to take one of the babies. Her experienced hands assessed the situation in moments. "Lord have mercy," she murmured. "This little one is hungry, and this mama looks ready to drop. Come on inside, child. Let's get some food in you." Rose bustled Sarah into the house, talking constantly in the soothing way she had with wounded creatures, whether they were human or animal. Thomas followed behind, carrying little Rebecca, who had settled into sleep against his shoulder. The warmth of the house enveloped them like an embrace. Rose had Sarah settled at the kitchen table with a bowl of stew before she could protest. While Sarah ate, Rose prepared bottles for the babies using milk from Thomas's small herd of dairy cows. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Rose asked as she heated the milk on the stove. "I can't remember," Sarah admitted between spoonfuls of stew. "This is wonderful." "I can't thank you enough." "Nonsense," Rose replied briskly. "You just concentrate on getting your strength back. These little ones need their mama healthy." Thomas sat quietly at the table, watching as Sarah's color began to return with food and warmth. The twins fed hungrily from their bottles and soon settled into peaceful sleep. For the first time since he'd found them that afternoon, Sarah's shoulders relaxed and some of the desperate tension left her face. "We can't stay long," Sarah said eventually. "I don't want to impose on your kindness." "You're not imposing," Thomas said firmly. "Tomorrow we can talk about what comes next. Tonight you need rest." Rose had already prepared the small guest room at the back of the house. It had been his daughter Emma's room before she married and moved to town, and it still held the